Old King Herod thought that John the Baptist had been a bad boy, a really bad boy. What he had done so bad was he had pointed out the immorality of the king, because the king had taken the wife of his brother Philip away from Philip and married her. And for that, old John the Baptist, this bad boy, was put in a cell in a dungeon. We think it was down by the Dead Sea. And while he was in that cell, although the king had put him there, the king didn't feel any obligation to feed him. So it was the custom in those days that when you ended up in a cell, your friends and the members of your family brought you food and came to see you. And so while some of these folks had come to see John, they began to tell him, as Mary read, what was happening up north in Galilee, about the mighty crowds that were coming out to hear Jesus teach, and about the tremendous acts of healing and guidance that Jesus was giving to the people. And John began to think. And he told two of his guys, you go back up there to Galilee, and you ask that Jesus, is he the one we have expected to come, or shall we look for another? When they found Jesus, they posed the question. And Jesus gave them a direct reply. You go back and you tell John what you hear and what you see, and that will be their answer. This morning we're gathered here in this church to talk about what we hear and what we see about the Friendship United Methodist Church. Almost 200 years in its existence. This church now has some things to let people see, let people hear about its ministry and its future. It might be 194 years old, if my arithmetic's correct. 194 years old, but there are surprising things that keep happening here. And we need to let people hear and see what those things are. Surprises. When I was a little boy, one of my favorite places to go was out to Grandma and Grandpa's farm. They lived out in the country in North Louisiana, 12 miles from the smallest little school. It was a one-mule farm, as we Southerners say. And Grandpa, being a Methodist preacher, he rode that same mule that during the week plowed the cotton over to the Methodist church where he was to preach. When he told me that story, I always felt sorry for the mule. Done his work all week, and now on Sunday he has to carry Grandpa over to preach the sermon. Grandma was a jolly one. I think I told you once about my grandma. Grandma was a jolly one. And she cooked in an old wood stove. Made, I don't know what you call them, but they were those things that she fried the dough around apples, and she put them up in the cabinet, and I had permission to go get me one every time I wanted one. At nighttime, Grandma would finish up over in the place where she did in the kitchen. Up there in North Louisiana, they didn't build their houses the way you do up here in Maine, where there's the house and then behind it, the big barns attached. They had the house in the middle and then little bitty buildings all around it that were dedicated to special functions. The barn for the mule was down here. Over around next to it was the smokehouse. Out beyond it were the chicken houses. Over there was the place dug in the ground where they kept the potatoes. On around there was the woodshed, and on around there was the barn for the cows, and behind it a shed for the goats, and over here was the syrup mill. All little surrounding the big house. House wasn't too big. And in the middle of it, it had a hallway that ran from one end to the other of the house, totally open. It was called, in our language, a dog trunk, because the dogs could run through it. Well, on one side of that was the dining room and the kitchen. And that's where Grandma cooked with her old wood stove. And then on the other side were the 4 other rooms of the house. One of them was the large room in which everybody sat, and which was also the bedroom for my grandma and grandpa. And it also had the only fireplace in the house that they kept going. So Grandma would finish cooking over here in the kitchen. She'd come across the dog trough into the main room, and she would always reach over in the wood box and she'd get her a pine knot and throw it underneath the logs. It made a difference whether the fire needed it or not. She liked to see the sparks fly. So she'd throw her pine knot under there. Then she had a very small straight back chair that she always sat in. She'd put it up close to the fire, and then she would start the stories. That was the part I liked. I remember especially she told about this couple that used to go to the store in town, and she would, the woman of that couple would tell the man that he needed to buy some new clothes. His pants were worn out, his shirt was worn out, he just needed to get some new clothes. No, these are fine, I don't need any. That went on for months. And then one day the man went to town by himself, and when he was in the store, he got this idea. He kind of chuckled. I'm going to surprise him when I get home. So he asked the man to bring him some trousers. He brought those. He was so proud of himself, he said, well, bring me a shirt. And after he got that, he thought, well, I'll just get me some new underwear. So he got the whole thing. The merchant put it on some brown paper, as they did in those days, tied it up with a piece of string. He took it out and threw it in the back of his wagon. Did a couple of other things, and then he started home. As he was driving his mule, pulling the wagon home, there was a long, straight stretch. There was a bridge that was over a river. When he got to the top of that bridge, he said to his old mule, he said, David, whoa! So he stopped there on the top of that bridge. He decided he'd really surprise his wife when he got home. So he took off his old shirt, put it on the wagon seat, he took off his old pants, he took off everything, put it over there, and after he got it all off, he picked him up, he looked at him, and he thought, you know, she's been right all this time. These things are so worn out, they're not even good for rags. So he threw them over the side of the bridge and watched them float off in the water. Then he reached back to get his sack. It was gone. He picked up his reins, tapped his mule, and he said, Darling, get up. When we get home, we're going to surprise you. Now, today we're talking about surprises here at this 194-year-old church. First surprise is that there's this instrument over here, this organ. Music has always had a special place in the worship of the church. Read back in the Old Testament, and you'll find many references to different instruments that were used. Music has always been especially important in our United Methodist tradition. So this organ is here. I've spent part of my life down in New Orleans, and we like jazz music. You know that jazz music, it makes you feel something. It makes you start moving in your spirit. There's one of those stars, Grammy stars, Erla Thomas, I believe is her name. She says about jazz music, she says, if you listen to that jazz and it don't put your back feel in motion, you better take your pulse. Now this music, this organ music that will be played here, will for years to come be able to lift the spirits of the people that come to worship in the Friendship United Methodist Church. What a great surprise it is to have that music. Second surprise is that parking lot out there. It's not just a convenient place to leave your vehicle. It's a symbol of the fact that this congregation is dedicated to its future. Not just its present or its past, but its future. So that space out there for parking and also for the enrichment of the surroundings of the church is a surprise to be celebrated. Those convenient and safe parking places say to this whole community that this congregation is a congregation in which everybody is welcome to come to worship. It also says that we believe that persons who come here will find their spirits to be uplifted and have the opportunity to grow in their faith as they listen to the sermons that Bob Dorr gives from this pulpit Sunday after Sunday, helping us to grow in our faith and to have uplifting in our spirits. That parking is a sign of the future. The third surprise that comes to us are many other improvements that have in recent times been made in this building. The very fact that you're concerned about its beauty and its convenience says that you want everybody to have the opportunity to be exposed to and make a commitment with the teachings of the Scriptures and the principles of the faith. Starting back in the Old Testament where the prophet said, "Let justice roll down like the waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream." And also to uplift those core values that Jesus was always talking about. Compassion for one another, peacemaking, empathy, hope, faith, and love. These improvements say that you believe that the church building is important because it is the place where these core values, week after week after week, are preached to remind us and to lead us. In 1983, I believe it was, and I was invited to go to China with the Centenary College Choir, which is a Methodist school down in my home state of Louisiana. There were 56 students in that choir. It was a big choir. And they frequently travel internationally and sing. But this was a special time because China, the Communist government of China, was just beginning to open up just a little bit. And they had invited this choir to come there and sing. Ann and I were invited to go. When we landed in the capital, Beijing, there was a man that came to see us immediately. His name was Wang, Mr. Wang. He was head of the section of the Chinese Communist government for all youth activities in the land. He had made the arrangement for this choir. It was his responsibility to appoint about 6 supervisors or people that would keep track of us as we were there, to be sure we didn't do anything we weren't supposed to do. And he decided that having 56 college people would probably mean it would be an interesting trip, so he assigned himself to be the head of the snoopers that were coming over. He met us at the airport in Beijing as soon as the plane landed. He took myself and the director of the choir aside and he said, "I want to see all the music that you're going to sing." They were to go around to about 10 different Chinese cities and sing in their theaters. "I want to see all the music." So he very carefully went through all the music because the agreement was that they would not sing any religious music. We all understood that before he came, so he searched all the music. After they had done the first concert in Shanghai, in a big theater, every seat sold out, Mr. Wong came to us and asked, "Does the choir know any of that black music?" concert, I want you to insert some of that black music. He didn't know the joke was on him. All that black music was religious, spiritual music. They put some of it in there. It was so interesting to us, too, that it come from the West. Those Chinese officials, they didn't know how much of the Western culture was already seeping into China. Because in the concerts, when the choir would sing certain pieces of music, I remember especially John Denver was popular at that time. And when they would sing some of John Denver's music, there would be people in the congregation and in the audience that would start singing the lyrics with them. Also, there was one place they made a request that the choir sing to them Jingle Bells. It was fascinating to see this. After we'd been to 2 or 3 cities, we ended up on a Sunday night in Shanghai. They had just built a large, tall, brand new hotel. And they were so proud to take these college students there to that new hotel. In fact, you could tell their attitude was, this is a coming generation. And so they're going to get the very best that we have to offer so that they'll remember us well. Well, that night in that new high-rise hotel, up on the top floor, which was a ballroom, they had the communists in that area. All the officials were there for a banquet. 33 courses were served at that banquet. 33. Now, in your potluck downstairs, you probably going to have 30 feet courses down there too. But that night it impressed us. And we had been asking this Mr. Wong as we went along, because we knew that there had been certain churches that had been given back to the church, and certain services were being held. It was very, very tightly controlled, and it even still today is tightly controlled in China. But they had opened these churches, and we'd keep asking Mr. Wong, can't we go to one of those churches and let the kids see that? On this night in Shanghai, Mr. Wong came to us and said, in the morning, I have a special treat for you. So the next morning we went outside and got in the 3 buses that it took to carry the choir, those who traveled with them. And we ended up at Moore Memorial Church. It was named for Bishop Moore, who for a long time was bishop down in Atlanta, Georgia. It was a large, large church. The communists had taken it from the congregation and turned it into an assembly plant for radios. They took the pews out and they put tables on the floor in the sanctuary, and that's where they assembled the parts for the radio. The rooms that they had in the church that they used for education, they had turned into a school. Now that building had been given back to the church. They had taken the tables out. The pews had been reinstalled. And on that Monday morning, Mr. Wong's surprise was that we were taken to that church. There were a couple of pastors there and about 4 lay people from the congregation. And they asked the choir to sing. It was kind of funny, the building was empty, but the choir got up and they sang anyway. And then the choir said to the pastor, said, you pick out something that we all know, and we'll sing it together. So they did that. Tremendous experience. And then these kids had a custom. Whenever, anywhere in the world, they sang in a church, they ended the service always the same way. They got everybody present to make a circle around the inside of the room. And they held hands. And they sang that blessing, the Lord bless you and keep you. And went on through those familiar words. Well, that day, when they finished singing, you know, you don't control 56 college kids. They have agendas of their own. But when they finished singing that part that both sides knew, they then caught hold of everybody's hand, including the 7 communist officials who were there to keep their eye on us. And the adults who were traveling with them, and the 6 or 7 from that church, got everybody by the hand and formed a circle, everybody around. And then they sang that blessing. When it was over, I happened to walk out the door of the church with Mr. Wong. And as we were walking out, this guy who wanted to be sure we didn't sing any religious music, he said to me, when we were walking out, he said, that was really something. I mean, everybody just took hands and we made a circle there. That was really something. And he said that sing that they did, he said it made my skin crawl, it tingled my skin, goosebumps. It gave me goosebumps. It took him a while to get the word finally got it. So he said it gave me goosebumps as we were marching out. And I thought in my heart, you old rascal, that's the Holy Spirit of God that's getting a hold of you. And it's giving you goosebumps. Oh, what a wonderful thing it is to be in this church. Here in Friendship, I've traveled now in 87 different countries of the world, and I've preached in many of them. But there's something about being here in this church that makes your soul start to tingle. Gives you spiritual goosebumps. And today, that's what we're celebrating here. Because of the things that you have done to celebrate your 194 years in the past and to look forward for the future. What a joy it is to be. You have been asked by our Lord to participate in the dedication of 3 significant parts of what you have done. You found in your bulletin this morning a service of dedication. And I'll ask Reverend Doris, he will come now, and he will lead you and the people in the congregation of preaching faith of these parts which we are today.